Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hôtelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik Ruttmann. HotStats is a leading provider of hotel financial intelligence, offering in-depth performance benchmarking beyond traditional metrics like RevPAR. Their data-driven insights help hoteliers, investors, and financial stakeholders optimize profitability by analyzing revenues, costs, and operational efficiencies. My guest today is Michael Grove, Chief Executive Officer of HotStats. Prior to joining HotStats, Michael held multiple operational and financial roles at hotel and corporate level for over 16 years. He's a regular conference speaker and guest lecturer at universities and hotel schools around the world. So Michael brings an unparalleled expertise in hospitality analytics. In this episode, he shares exclusive industry trends, financial strategies, and market shifts that every hotelier need to know. If you want to stay ahead in the evolving industry, understand the power of data, boost your bottom line, this conversation is a must listen. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Nice to see you again.
Yes. Well, could you just talk about, you have a background in hospitality and as a hotelier and the financial aspect. Can you talk about your experience and also how this relates to now from hotelier point of view on HotStats?
Yeah, sure. I guess as a way of intro for people who don't really know who HotStats are and what we do specifically. So our HotStats actually collects monthly P&Ls from hotels all around the world. We help hoteliers with benchmarking services. So as part of the kind of the back and forth, they provide the data. We provide benchmarking services after normalizing the data into a kind of central chart of accounts, so it's comparable. And then also that data is also utilized in the kind of investment community in the non-operational side of the business. I actually come from the operational side of the business. So as you said in your intro there, I spent most of my career in hotel operations, hotel finance. I actually, the typical British hotelier story of started on the bar, worked my way through the ranks through F&B into front office, and then when I wanted better hours, better working hours, so I moved into finance because I saw they were 9 to 5ers. And actually really got a buzz for it because what I realized in finance was that I was able to kind of get a good handle on what was going on in all parts of the hotel, pretty much everything channeled through finance. So I then held multiple financial controller roles. And, one thing I was keen on, because I came from operations, I wasn't an accountant by any means. I had a passion for hotels and a passion for operations and a passion for helping, people who necessarily didn't get to look at the financials or interpret the financials in the way that I got to do it. So I actually really enjoyed bringing the hotel, the other heads of department into the conversation, kind of explaining to them how the financials work, but also how to improve their performance without the kind of top-down approach, but really working with them on a daily basis. And as part of that, we, as things progressed, I'd always use some kind of benchmarking as part of the, reviewing any kind of results, because I think it's fundamental, and hotels have over the years kind of managed that and become very good at it, certainly from a rooms perspective. But I just felt like I looked across and the revenue team had this access to this great data, this kind of daily analysis of top line metrics, and they would use that. And then the sales guys would have some kind of performance benchmarking on what was coming in through the various channels, GDS, etc., for in the corporate world. And we didn't really have very much at all in the way from a finance perspective. And then one day, I was lucky. I worked for a company in the UK that the head of finance was a big fan of the company called HotStats, who had, I guess recently emerged at that point. And he got HotStats to come and present to us. And when I saw it, first of all, I was like, this is such a great concept. I just really had some questions around how comparable that data could really be, because we knew that, from a financial perspective, there's so many variances in the way we did things. But the great advantage, once I could get my head around how the company was dealing with the comparability, was how effective it could be on property when I was able to actually utilize some kind of benchmarking myself from a financial perspective, but also bring the other heads of departments in. They could also get a part of the P&L that was specific to them, and they could benchmark how they were performing against the market. So when trying to set a strategy or trying to assess the success of their strategy, it added an extra dynamic. And for me, that was a really early sign. And then later down in the line, when I got corporate roles, helping a kind of senior level, overseeing a group of hotels, that analysis became also quite different, because then you made management decisions as a business, as a company, on the way that we were operating, whether it was the focus on the top line metrics or even the middle of the P&L, but ultimately getting everyone around the same thing, which was a profit metric. And that is really what HotStats is about, was just having a holistic approach to benchmarking your hotel business, and the bottom line being the thing that's actually benchmarked at the end of it all.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Okay, that's fantastic. I mean, this has been an area which many hotels are focusing on very limited amount of KPIs, and I think that I'm quite familiar with HotStats, and I found it very, very helpful and useful during my years in with hotel companies and so on. I noticed you'll be already speaking at the various hospitality investments events. I mean, last year, you must be speaking at many events, and then already this year you've been, I think you were in Milan, if I'm not mistaken, or Madrid. And could you share some takeaways about the mood now and what issues people are worried about that keep them up at night? Not necessarily what happened last night or yesterday in the world, but maybe just sort of the hospitality side of things, what they are thinking about now. Are they positive or cautious, or how are they? What is the mood?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky, as you said, to be in the various forums around the world. We did 72 events as a company last year, which sounds incredible for pretty much anyone, but we are obviously a global business. This year I've done 9 already, which is, again, a mix of operator forums and investment conferences. And the reason I mention that is because obviously they come from 2 very different angles often. You have the investors looking at the outlook from a supply and demand perspective, transaction volumes, challenges around financing. And then from an operator's perspective, it's generally, much more on the ground operational, the challenges are actually hitting hotels. And where they meet in the middle is around the kind of profitability part of it, because really that's the central interest for all parties. And I think that these conferences have a real mixed bag, because as you look around the world, there are various different challenges and various different tailwinds as well. Actually, some real interesting trends in the industry, which maybe we'll get into. The common headache, to be honest, is around anything that's going to slow the revenue growth. And that sounds like an obvious thing to say, but in the good times, where costs were kind of rising in line with fairly minimal inflation, and the top line was really driven by a mix of supply and demand and global travel patterns. Now there are so many other nuances to that discussion. Hotels of various different types are going through various different parts of the cycle. There are various different political challenges in the world, which I think are fairly unprecedented, certainly in the last 20 odd years. And I think a lot of that, does scare hoteliers, because if we see a slowdown of revenue and demand, the one thing that's certainly not slowing at the speed that we needed to are areas like labor costs, and some of the ongoing costs of doing business in hotels. So I think any type of revenue growth, the slowdown, and I looked at the numbers this morning. We were looking at a presentation for the United States, for instance, where in December the US saw pretty flat growth. RevPAR was almost flat, but profitability was negative 6.5%. So it's profit per available room. So the story is not flat. The story is actually negative 6.5, because you can't really bank the flat top line growth.
Yeah.
So that's a sign, and it's been a pattern kind of coming into 2025. Now, as we said, we presented in Madrid in Spain. The Spanish market's been very different. The Spanish market's a hot market. Southern Europe in general is a pretty hot market. So we've seen pretty substantial growth. Those cost challenges have not really been the same there, even with the size of energy cost increases we've seen in Europe. They've been able to offset a lot of it through pretty good revenue growth. So the challenge is different in different parts of the world, but the common headache is if you see the revenue slow down, profitability is going to be a key challenge.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that the industry has evolved past focusing solely on RevPAR and occupancy rates. What are the most overlooked metrics that hoteliers should be now prioritizing today?
So I think that's an interesting question that I get a lot, because obviously we're flying the flag for, I'm certainly not saying get away from RevPAR, occupancy and rate. They're key metrics. We sell hotel bedrooms at the end of the day. But the challenge is that you spend a lot of time just focusing on those things. It's why we're really good at selling bedrooms, but we also have other revenue streams in the building to consider, whether that's in operation or in development. So at the early stage of building a hotel, and then you have the various cost bases that come with the various operating models. So there's so many things to consider, and just looking at how well we sell bedrooms is really just not enough. I would go as far as saying there's no kind of individual metrics that really, I'd say profit is the ultimate kind of, everything centers around profit when you get to the bottom of it. But, there's correlations, I think, is the thing that we're now able to do that we've never been able to do. If I was going to say to it, if I was back in hotel operations, who knows where that will end up one day, I know I'd have a real passion for scorecarding and the things that kind of we now have access to that we couldn't do before. The correlation between I pull this lever in my operation, so I do this thing different here. That's the impact it has on my profitability versus the competitors. So this is how for every line of the P&L, for every area of your business, if I spend this extra money in marketing, this is the difference it will make to my room's cost of sales and my ultimate net RevPAR. For me, that's more important. It's not necessarily individual metrics. Obviously, for me, looking further than just rooms revenue, so total revenue per available room, I think is a key part of revenue management. I actually think that we've built the industry in a way where, certainly the revenue verticals in hotels, so the revenue managers, the directors of sales and marketing, the general managers, etc. They're often incentivized on RGI or rooms index. And then you'll have maybe the sales team, the C&B sales team or the in-office sales teams will be focused on the sale of C&B, right, for instance, or other revenues. And then you'll have the F&B guys focused on that. So it's all in isolation, and actually they interlink so much that doesn't really make a massive amount of sense. And the focus needs to get more on the total revenue management, which is the ability to be able to pull this lever, so increase occupancy by doing something different, and that will have knock-on effects on the other areas of your business, or maybe not, and maybe the levers are different in the fact that you can grow your rate by adding additional services in other parts of the building. So I think there's more to it than just looking at individual metrics. I think it's the correlation, it's how the metrics kind of interlink that is the new way of looking at it, and hence so much focus on business intelligence and companies like ours who've obviously come to the forefront because we're very much focused on looking at the holistic picture.
Yeah, I had a discussion just a couple of days ago with a operator who wants to enter into the Finnish or the Arctic Lapland market. And so they asked me the obvious questions: how is the performance there? And my answer was, well, there's a lot of sort of bulk travel, but then there are some individual hotels which are quite creative, and they go beyond of selling rooms. So they started to offer these kind of services like swimming in the ice, or in a lake where they break the ice and then you have a chance to swim for an hour, and they offer then all kinds of hot towels and so on. And I asked them, can you imagine how much people are prepared to pay for that experience? I said, no. Well, 500 euro. And that's already booked into other income. So that actually, and the cost basically is just the labor to break the ice and whatever the drinks are and the manpower, whatever. So it's highly profitable. So they're becoming very creative up in Lapland in providing all these kind of services that we didn't think of before. We took it as a normal thing, in the sauna culture in Finland, that we go after the sauna to dip in cold water. But now tourists are willing to pay all kinds of money for that once in a life experience, that they can have this brag effect that they survive this kind of experience, and they're still paid 500. So financially, it's quite a good creative way how to make some additional money.
And Sam, I'm quite passionate about this because, again, at this stage, I'm a data guy, right? So I only look at it from the data point of view, and of course the conversations I have in the various forums I'm lucky enough to be in. And I think what you're saying is amazing, because we didn't even discuss this before. It's exactly the topic on the ground. It's exactly the flag I'm flying right now, is that, as revenue starts to slow down, I'm not sure that we have that many levers in order to be able to reduce costs without really hindering the guest experience, certainly in Northern Europe and in the US, because the cost base is already fairly lean, right? We've already gone through that exercise some time ago, as we've gone through the various different crises. So it's really about driving that that top line and how we're going to get creative. And the various forums I'm in go all the way from like luxury portfolios, like you said, resort style, where they have the ability to pull extra levers. They can start coming up with new concepts of, horse riding and things that they never used to do before that is like no longer part of it. And then somebody will say, okay, but I'm a limited service hotel in the city centre. What do I do, right? And of course, I don't have necessarily the answer for that, but I can certainly pull reference from what I've seen from other areas. And for many of them, it's as small as doing what. And again, I hate to refer back to it, because I think hoteliers general don't like the concept of it. But I'm not against the airline model of you kind of have your package, you have your you pay for your room, and then your seat on the airline. And when I get close to the day, it's so connected that it's kind of selling me all of those extra services, those extra bolt-on services. Do I want to upgrade? Do I need extra? Are you sure you've got your own insurance? Are you sure you're not going to need to hire a car? It kind of like, before you know it, you get right there, and then it's like, do you want to pay £20 extra to get a meal deal on the flight or whatever it is?
Yeah. And
actually, as I'm getting closer to it, even if I've paid, let's say I've paid, as cheap as £50 for for a seat on a Ryanair flight or something, and then they say, oh, do you want to pay an extra £10 to get yourself a nice seat at the front? I'm like, well, yeah, it's £10. But actually, I paid 20% extra, right? I paid 20% extra for that seat. And I think hotels have the ability to pull other levers. It's late checkout, early check-in, upgraded room, small little package in the room. All those things, it's not new. We did this before, but the focus has become less on that because we're so conscious of costs.
Yeah.
And it costs more to do that. It costs more to serve room service. It costs more to upsell. And I think that, that's really the connected journey with the guest, understanding what the guest needs are and being able to upsell to those things. I get super impressed when I go to a hotel and they remember, what I liked from my previous stay and try to upsell that to me, right? That is, I think, pretty, that's impressive, and it's also really good from a revenue generating point of view. So I totally agree. The other, just before we finish on that point, the other thing for consideration is, hotels over the last 15 years or so, we had other upselling items that we I guess we don't really have anymore. So, simple things. We used to make commission on foreign exchange transaction at front desk. Telephone charges. They were incredibly lucrative, actually, when you look back on it. You had internet charges, right? We were charged for the additional cost on a guest stay for internet charges. So they were all like bolt-on revenue channels that we could almost upsell during the guest stay, and they don't really exist anymore. We've lost quite a few of those as part of technology improvements and guest needs. So we haven't really replaced those, and I think as we go forward, those kind of things that we know that selling rooms is just not going to be enough.
No.
You can only drive that so much, and actually those additional revenues are what are going to help you offset the cost increases, because they are certainly in areas like Northern Europe, they are going to continue to increase every year, right? So
yeah, that's interesting. It's in conversation I enjoy having about how you can be audacious and come up with some new ideas, and listening to what the traveler will appreciate, and even if you can find out before they arrive, even better, and then you can actually surprise them in a very pleasant way. And then the cost is not the factor; it's just that they They just got what exactly they were expecting, even though that they didn't ask for it. So that's kind of a
Well, I think for the international travel I can tell you it doesn't happen everywhere, right? And the Middle East is a really good example, I think, for hospitality. And I certainly would, obviously point to somewhere like Dubai as the obvious one. I'm a regular. I go 5-6 times a year. I stay at, probably 2 or 3 different hotels there. And I arrived recently at a hotel there. I give a shout out actually to the Dress Beach Resort. Because it was an absolutely incredible experience there. And one thing I thought they did really amazingly there is I went the night before because we were organising an event. Went to the bar after doing doing a bit of a debrief with my colleague, and I ordered an old fashioned, which is my late night drink. She'd ordered herself a prosecco, and then that was it. She left. I went to bed. Woke up the next morning. Went to the pool, and it must have been like 10 a.m. I'm sat next to the pool, and the waiter came over and he said, "Good morning, Mr. Grove. Would you like an old fashioned?" And I was just blown away by it, because it's kind of like, what a brilliant, number one, from an experience point of view, it's really personalised. He recognised me, knew what I drank the night before. I mean, talk about the connected stay. But actually, then from an upselling point of view, I was not going to have an old fashioned at 10:30 in the morning, but I treated myself because of the prompt. And I this again, it's I think that's a really nice example of those of the opportunity.
Yeah. People talk about automation and AI versus a human touch, and I just want to get your feel with this rise of automation in hospitality. Do you think hotels risk losing the essence of personalized service? Or where should a hotel draw the line between tech efficiency and the human connection? What's your view on that?
Look, I mean, I can tell you that from the operator conferences and the investment conferences more directly, where it's kind of a forum where there's press there, etc. So the themes generally are, people are careful about how they talk about it, I think, in some ways, and maybe I have the ability to be more candid about how I feel about automation and certainly the implementation of AI. I think there are, for those that do it well, for those who have this kind of focus, not just on how can AI, squeeze the bottom line or squeeze the cost lines for me a little bit further. I think there has been quite a lot of talk, quite a lot of negative talk around how AI will impact people and impact the hotel guest experience, as an example there. I actually have a really mixed view on AI, because I feel like automation in general allows you to do some of those things we were talking about, that connected journey. We finally have the tools, we have the data, we have the kind of the infrastructure. But the thing we have, everything's disjointed. So you have some of the data here, you have the tech stack in hotels generally is overcomplicated because it's been bolted on over years and years and years. There's often some of it's cloud-based, some of it's sat on site. There's lots of different nuances, and actually this automation allows you to pull a lot of that together, right? So going back to my point on correlating the data, which I think is a big deal for certainly in the world I'm in, from a hotel operational perspective and from a guest experience point of view. Automation can help us join a lot of those dots. It can help us automate the way that we look at preferences and push them to guests. Some of the software, even a HotStats, we're looking at using automation to reach in our customers to do the things that we know that they don't want to speak to us when they're doing, right? They want to get regular information on, in their market, which new hotels we've added, or what's the latest trend in that market from a data point of view, and they don't want, they don't wait for us or have to ask us for it. The idea that we can use automation to kind of push some of that to them is something we're exploring right now, and hopefully we'll achieve this year. But there are, of course, on the other side, there's some opportunities from a cost perspective, and I think a lot of those are around trying to help you isolate where in the hotel you have holes in the operation. So hopefully back of house consumption, for instance, energy consumption. You can imagine what AI could do to help us deal with the energy consumption issue. Looking at the way that humans can't really look at it. When are we not using it? Can we turn it on and off when it's not needed? Using automation. I'm not saying we haven't had these kind of business controls before, but certainly not to the level where AI is able to really drive that kind of stuff. So spotting inefficiencies in areas that don't affect staff and don't affect guests is the obvious place to go, right? And I've always been a huge advocate for that.
Yeah.
And then there are things that at the moment I don't know about you. I can talk on behalf of lots of my friends in the industry. We're totally overwhelmed with admin and work, right? We're totally overwhelmed with areas that should never have really, as we've stripped up the hotel operating structures, and even companies like ours, we keep the workforce fairly lean, certainly in comparison to what probably would have happened 20 years ago. You end up overwhelmed with a lot of things that you kind of need to do on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
You've got to keep on top of all of these different things, and I'm really enjoying exploring the automation options for doing these these mundane tasks, these things that really I much better using my time for other things, and I think many of the hoteliers will find the same thing. So is a waiter better off spending their time with the customer, upselling and actually talking and making that experience really good? Or are they better off in the back doing the reconciliation of the various checks from the night and does it really make sense for a waiter? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? The same with a receptionist. If you look at the things that receptionists have to go through, that checklist, that never-ending checklist for a receptionist on a daily basis, night audit, there's so many different areas of hotels. You're not going to lose. People need to be. People want to see people, right? There's things that still humans will always have to do, because I cannot ever imagine a bot being able to do what humans can do from a personal touch point of view.
Yeah,
so I think it's about freeing them up.
Yeah, I also, in point of during the years I was a general manager, I mean, we spent starting from the morning briefing until 4 p.m. there was continuous meetings, and I'm sure there are so many ways you can actually streamline all this. That you can reduce that administration part, the kind of the heavy duty administration side that has been existence in our industry for such a long time, and that you actually spend the time you spend is with your customers, who are in the hotel, or the customers who you want to bring to the hotel, and also with your team. And I'm all for whatever I can use in terms of automation to reduce my time in the office is much better. And I'm sure there's a lot of colleagues that I agree on this point.
Yeah, you can imagine the modeling for chefs on orders, for instance, being another example. Menu engineering and ordering. You can imagine how that could be totally simplified, so chefs actually spend their time on quality of food, meeting guests, having a strategic discussion. I think this is really exciting, right? For me, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know about you, but I utilize these note takers, right? The automated note takers, the AI generated ones. And what I found, I didn't know it did this until I started using it, was it jumped into meetings where I was invited as optional, which obviously in my business is quite a lot. But I don't go to every single meeting. I drop in from time to time to them, but there's people who are responsible for those areas, so I don't need to be there, but I'm interested. And this thing sends me like a 3-4 minute highlight reel of the key items that came out of that meeting, a video or in the way of transcript. And I can quickly just get a quick scan of what happened in the meeting. I can hone in if there's something I was interested in, but I don't need to join all of those meetings, which makes me more operational. And it's a really small and quite obvious improvement in the way that we operate, just by having that one area, more advanced. Marketing is going to be the other one, because we know that that's probably the area hoteliers have taken years to get their heads around marketing, the best way to go to market, whether it's SEO or these online spotlights, or whether it's which channels are the right ones, who trying to identify the target audience. All those things have been I think we've managed to get our heads around it, and hoteliers have managed to master the keywords and the algorithms and all that stuff. And then AI comes along, and everything just gets thrown up in the air, because it's the methods that the hoteliers are using to reach audiences change, and of course. No, that's currently could be perceived as a threat, but actually it brings everything back into your hands. It's not in the hands of of the institutions that have been there until now. It's in it's in your hands again, right? You can probably get to the forefront of that now. and take advantage over your competitors in a way you couldn't necessarily maybe do before. So I think you can look at each one of them as a kind of maybe a slight risk, but certainly on the flip side, it's coming, and it could definitely be the thing that separates you from the rest.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories I just recently heard, and I was talked to a chef who has started his own company, and what he does is that they realize there are certain slow periods in the hotel restaurant, which they have after breakfast, between breakfast and lunch, after lunch, before the dinner. And those hours, to try to figure out how can we make most out of this time. So he came up with the idea. He started to create these concepts of restaurant brands, and then provided those. And he realized in the community where the hotel was located, there are people ordering takeaway or delivery orders. So he started to put 25 different brands of different sandwiches, kebabs, or whatnot, which are popular anyway. And the hotel restaurant and a chef could, so when people are ordering, they're ordering online, but they don't actually know where it's being cooked. It's been actually cooked in the hotel kitchen.
Yeah,
and so they have the recipes, everything. So of course they make sure that they get the recipe consistently right every time. And then there is your friendly delivery guy comes with his electric bicycle and picks up the order and delivers to somebody's home. But the person who ordered only knew from a website, which has nothing to do with the hotel at all, nothing to do with the hotel restaurant. Only knows your kebab or whatnot, and it is delivered to their home because it's quite close where the hotel is. So I thought that was a kind of a brilliant way how to use manpower that you have already, and then you can do something else on the time when things are slow.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's the creativity. I mean, some of it seems a bit wild. It could even feel a little bit scary, I think, some of the strategies you see in the industry. But actually, again, you have to be creative. You have to look at the business model you're in. Obviously, the data helps drive a lot of that.
Yeah.
We know, I'll give you an example. In the UK, for instance, food and beverage trends, certainly in all-day dining, standard hotel outlet, F&B outlets are, have seen a real downward trajectory. This guest spend has slowed down and in some ways decreased. Profitability has become a huge challenge. If you're a standalone bar and restaurant right now, that's really quite a challenge. We're lucky in hotels, obviously, the bedrooms are highly profitable, so you can offset some of this. But food and beverage profitability has become, it was a bigger issue than the energy cost challenge during the last couple of years. But that's a statistic fact. So there's been all sorts of different ways that this has kind of come together. On the one hand, you've got, yes, guests want to order from outside. So you have the flip side to what you're saying is that you have the guests who are staying in the bedrooms or ordering from the restaurants outside, right? And hotels either try to fight that and try to come up with their own concepts, or if they are a certain type of hotel that works for them, and I've seen examples of this, they cut a deal with the delivery companies and they just accept that someone like me, honestly, when I stay at a hotel, I might have room service, but if the room service menu's boring and I don't want to sit in their all-day dining restaurant, I'm quite likely to order from the local Wagamama's or something, right? I'm pretty likely to do it. So I can, because it's every guest has their own preferences and does their own thing. So why wouldn't and I've seen this as a hotel chain in the UK who did it and used their restaurant, closed their stores, went through a real change in the way they do it. They have a co-working space concept, QR codes. You can scan, you can get to one of the online delivery companies, you can order your food in, they will give you the crockery and the cutlery for your meal. They'll even serve you a drink to go with it. And they make their money off the drink first, before and after, and the rest of it, they've taken a commission cut with the online delivery companies. Yeah. And you see that kind of go, I'm not sure that's really what would work for my business. Maybe there are other ways of looking at it, as those high street chains have struggled over the last few years. And again, this is a pattern around Europe, but definitely in the UK. Big chains like TGI Fridays looking at closing down. It's really quite sad. I use the example of Whitbread, biggest operator of hotels and F&B in the UK, who have now decided to close some of their traditional beefeater restaurants and turn them into bedrooms or bring them into the hotel. They used to sit outside of the hotel. And actually, that concept is kind of amazing, right? Because you think, well, as they're struggling on the high street because offices are still not back to capacity, the high street is struggling from a retail point of view. Maybe hotels can become the center of the community again. Maybe those high street brands, the shops and the restaurants move inside of hotels like you find them in many parts of the world. Residences next door, so hotels become that kind of the community hubs again. Yeah. And I think that's quite an exciting concept, right? So it could be really negative right now, and there's lots of challenges for hotels to consider. But if we look at the trends and we look at the way things are going, hotels are the place to go for wellness. The hotels are the place to go for for experiences and guests and golf and all of this kind of stuff. So maybe hotels will become the place to go again for guests.
Yeah, very good. So you're traveling around the world. I would be interested to learn a little bit, to hear your views. I mean, the areas which is booming, let's say maybe the Middle East and India and Vietnam and what areas of Europe. So maybe we can start with the Middle East. I mean, I see that how Dubai and Saudi Arabia are experiencing a unprecedented hospitality growth. What is your views? Is that the sustainable expansion, or is there a risk of oversaturation? How do you see it, that area, part of the world?
Well, I mean, look, I lived in the Middle East for a while. I'm a regular visitor to the UAE and many of the GCC countries. This year alone, in fact, next week I fly to Dubai and I head on to India, which again is another market I think we should talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. But the one thing I've learned over the years is never bet against certainly Saudi and the UAE. I just never, just when you think that the UAE has kind of done everything it possibly can do, there's a whole new level of surprise, right? There's a whole new level of demand that arrives. Supply into Dubai in particular has been absolutely incredible for the last kind of 15, 20 years. And demand has kept up with it, right? So we've continued to see, the levels of growth in that market that I just don't think you can really compare to many places in the world. But I would separate the two stories because Saudi Arabia and UAE have very different, very different makeups of the segmentation, and they have different fundamentals in the way that they're kind of planning for the future. For the UAE, like I said, demand has kept up with supply, so there's been no, that I think, and I say UAE purposely because actually, just going back to your point there, Dubai has seen very much a slowdown over the last 12 months. So Dubai, on the back of some record levels years. I mean, we saw just under 10 percentage points increase in GOP margin since pre-COVID in Dubai. Right? Just to give you an example of the level of incredible change in that market. But year on year, it's slowed, and actually profitability has slightly dropped off. It's stabilizing at 43, 44%, right? So it's pretty amazing profit levels. But the tertiary Emirates and the secondary Emirates, so Abu Dhabi is, I think, the number one market in the world right now from a growth point of view year on year. You've got the Ras Al Khaimah, what's happening there, the implementation of casinos and things that are kind of, again, unprecedented. We keep using that word, but that market really does do those kind of things. And they can hold such huge events like the Expo. They've had some of these huge events that went into those markets. And again, what we call unprecedented. And then the following year we replaced them with something else.
Yes.
And it's like that. That just continues to happen. I think Saudi Arabia has obviously it's a huge country and has lots of different parts to. They're planning for the future. They're hedging their bets on their tourism strategy. Tourism into Saudi Arabia outside of religious travel is pretty minimal. And therefore, diversifying and focusing on tourism in particular, I think, considering the outstanding beauty of parts of that country and actually outstanding hospitality, if anyone who gets to experience it can definitely vouch for. So culturally, it has a lot of things to offer. But, when it comes to actually measure from a scientific point of view, you're adding this extra supply into the market, build it and they will come mentality. There are obviously some risks and some considerations in that. However, religious travel continues to grow, so that again, some of that fundamental business is going to be important. They're a big player in the region. A very stable country from a political perspective, and then moving into opening up the Red Sea and these amazing giga projects, I think is pretty exciting. The thing I'd say is that I was at a JLL event yesterday in London where they were talking about the cost of building in the Middle East, where in some circumstances it's more than doubled the cost of building supplies, and therefore the cost of doing this pretty unbelievable scale of a project becomes much more expensive. So I think there is a bit of there might be some slow of supply, and that'll obviously help from a hotel performance perspective. So I think it's a mixed bag there. The other thing that are in the Middle East, outside of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, is some of those countries that are not their currency is not necessarily pegged to the dollar. So countries like Egypt, Lebanon, Turkey have seen incredible fluctuations in currencies. And if you think we've seen inflation in Europe and in the US, you should have a look at these countries, because they've really had challenges over the last few years, and of course that's had all sorts of impact on hotel performance. If we go over to Asia, I spent time last year in Vietnam. I did a couple of trips to Thailand, and obviously I've been presenting a lot on certainly on India, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan. Some real exciting stuff going on in that part of the world for sure. And there is still, if you look at a market like India, in fact, India and Vietnam, I think were the two that kind of came out of the back end of my last presentation, having quite different dynamics. India, very much domestic business, so still very domestic market, very heavily weighted towards corporate. And the tick up of leisure travel in going with the increase in population and the increase of the middle class, so the growing proportion of the middle class in that market, and still fairly limited supply in the scale of things, means that India's performance has been, absolutely outstanding. And there's still so many more levels to it, because to my point, there are, there's still much more international business to go into India, and international travel, international tourism, right? International leisure travel into a region that has all sorts of things to offer for international guests. Vietnam is quite different, because Vietnam does have pretty, I think 25% of the segmentation is corporate, so it does have a significant corporate base. But of course, it's very much an international leisure destination, right? So there is certainly now. So Vietnam has so many things to offer, and so many parts of the country to offer international guests, and of course, international guests spending significant amounts of money in a country where the cost of goods, the cost of labor is still relatively low in comparison to other parts of the world. So from a hotel performance perspective, that really, really helps. Just to throw out some anecdotal numbers, India's labor cost as a percentage of revenue is just under 17% of total revenue. And if you compare that to somewhere like the US, for instance, that is just under the 40% mark, there's a stark gap between, and knowing that the pricing in India can only get, it'll only continue to grow as more international guests come in, and of course the growing middle class, the increase of luxury, the luxury segment. So much more that can happen there. And in Vietnam, I think it's a really exciting time. The infrastructure has come on so much over the last few years, and it's probably my favorite place to visit in the world right now. I think many people who visit Vietnam would say the same thing. So that's my summary of some of those amazing places in Asia in particular.
Okay, I've been looking at what's happening in the US, and I was just saw one report that Wyndham expects a stronger performance for this year. They talk about the leisure travel pickup by booking time by 4% and average length stays up by 2%. I'm not sure if that's our exciting numbers, but they try to talk about that there has been like a $1 trillion US dollar in infrastructure in 2024. So they start to see some impact on those. Any just an kind of overall view? You mentioned that US quite flat. Do you still there's a light at the end of the tunnel? Because Wyndham was quite positive about how they are doing and also how the market might be performing.
Look, I mean, Wyndham are the biggest hotel company in the world. They obviously have incredible expertise there, so I wouldn't mind to argue with Wyndham.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that, just on the recent trends, the economy segment has been the hardest hit in the US for sure. But where the growth has come, it's come in the top end segments. There's been an incredible amount of supply go into that, to the economy segment. And also, there's been a real uptick. I mean, apparently in 2025, it's predicted the US will become the number one outbound traveler in the world now. So I think for as a source country, US will come number one, and there's a big reason for that. Obviously, the dollar is incredibly strong compared to certainly the euro and the pound, etc. So the Americans traveling to Europe is a pretty big deal. But I think many predict that actually more hits the higher ended segments, because the people staying in the economy hotels in the US are not necessarily the people who are looking to travel to Europe. So instead of spending their money in the US, they'll spend their money in Europe because they're going to get significantly more for it right now. So I think there could be, we have seen the recent trends had been challenges for the economy segment, but obviously that has to normalize at some point. If you look at the year-on-year impact, maybe some uptick in the lower end segments, is something that you could predict. There is obviously more infrastructure. Wyndham are much more focused. They obviously a significant chunk of their hotels are roadside and interstate, etc. So I think there'll be a mixed bag for various different operators. The one thing I would say is that any kind of growth that we're talking about, if you go back to what I said about December, we're going to need more than just a couple of % growth on the top line to offset these costs. And we know that there are so many other things going on in the US that makes it quite unpredictable for 2025 and beyond for sure.
Yeah. COVID is kind of still in the back of my memory and many people's memory, and it reshaped the hospitality overnight. In your view, any thoughts on what could be the next big disruptor that hoteliers aren't preparing for?
Well,
you have a crystal ball, or?
No, I just think it's a very difficult one, isn't it? Because you kind of don't want to be doom and gloomy. I'm so sorry. I'm just overcoming some man flu, so it's. I think the reality is that at the moment, the thing that is probably worrying people the most is obviously the political situation, and not necessarily, the direct impact on people's lives, but the interconnectivity, the deglobalization, I think is is one thing that could impact international travel and hotels in particular. So there's obviously been. Sorry, can you hear the noise in the background? Okay, good. I have a dog who's barking there. So I think the challenge could be, at the moment we're very connected. We've had really an amazing 20, 30, 40 years of international travel and connectivity, traveling to every country, and I think that's been that's obviously a massive advantage for hoteliers. But as we have more and more challenges from a political perspective, and it becomes more fragmented, that could be, a challenge for the industry.
Yeah,
for us to prepare for.
Yeah. So, looking at your journey, I'm interested if you had to distill your career lessons into one piece of advice for aspiring hoteliers, because I have several hotel school students around the world listening to my podcast, and so I always interested to see what my guests could give some little bit of advice. And what piece of advice could you give to some aspiring hoteliers? And then the second part is, what impact do you hope to leave on the industry?
Well, so actually, the first one, I'm quite lucky that similarly, I speak at many of the hotel schools around the world, and I started doing this thing where I basically just present my career for the first 5 minutes, and bit by bit, I was asked to extend it further because my career, where I basically didn't get any, educational qualifications, for instance. I worked my way through the ranks. I did it the hard way. I did it the fun way, I believe. But ultimately, I think the route for me came from the fact that although I probably have some academic abilities, I didn't enjoy it at all. I was just not someone who enjoyed school. I was much more of a people person and much more hands-on. So going to hotels was like a massive find for me, and hotel operations specifically. And what I say to the students often is, number one, I don't dismiss education, because I think education, even though I didn't go through that channel, I wish I could have, because I think it would have given me a nice head start going into the industry. But many of the students now want to bypass operations. It's not the cool area of hotels in their mindset. Marketing is cool, business development is cool, feasibility, real estate, they're cool. Hotel operations is not really seen as cool. And from my experience of 20 odd years in hotels, having done all of the roles and enjoyed all of them in various different ways, I can tell you hotel operations is by far the most enjoyable part of hotels, of this industry. And it's the reason to be in this industry. It's the main reason to be in this industry. You can do marketing or business development anywhere else.
Yeah.
You don't need to be in hotels to do that, even real estate. But the thing about hotels that really is different and separates people like me from, I guess, many of my friends, is the fact that I really enjoy dealing with people. It's a great place to be able to work up through the ranks. And the one thing that I think I kind of learned, and I really passed down to pretty much everyone else now, was just finding the role, the career path that suits your personality best. Not what you want to do, not what other people think you should do, but actually something that really is going to fit your personality type the best, because then you'll really see the best version of you. And I think hotels allowed me to do that, because I found it, and even when I was in hotels, I worked through all of the departments until I kind of found the thing that really was going to accelerate my career. And now I stepped out of hotels, stepped out of finance, but now I work in data with hotels. So I deal with hoteliers on a daily basis all around the industry. And I deal with finance people using my finance skill set to talk about data. So, I've managed to find my sweet spot at the end of it whilst trying all of those things. But operations was the central force in kind of in my career. Mm-hmm. The impact I'd like to leave on the industry, I think that's an interesting one, because I don't, from a selfish perspective, I think what I've already been quite a big part of, and HotStats, I'll talk on behalf of HotStats rather than myself, was to kind of just move the industry one step away from kind of narrow-minded focus on RevPAR and the top-line metrics, and the way we look at the business, not necessarily just the metrics, because the boring part of it, but it's the way we look at the hotel business. And I think what we've managed to do is really get the industry to see another way of looking at hotels, and provided the forum and the reliability for people to be able to actually measure and do something about it. So pulling the operators and owners together, for instance, into one area that they all care about, which is profitability. So that I think that, and honestly, from a selfish level, I'd like to walk away from the industry at some point, and people kind of look back at me fondly and say, he did things the right way. He did things with integrity, and he was generally a nice guy and fun to be around, right? That's really what I care on a personal level. But I think if I'm talking from a business perspective, the fact that we've managed to move the industry this direction, I think, is a pretty heavy weight for us to have managed to carry.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. This has been a very interesting conversation with you. And now, if people want to connect with you or to find out more about HotStats, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, connect with me personally and HotStats on LinkedIn. We do quite a lot of, and also on social media in other channels. We obviously post a lot of information there. And if they're interested in learning more and want to have a discussion, you can find us on www.hotstats.com, and the email address is inquiries@hotstats.com. I look forward to talking more with everybody.
Excellent. Thank you for tuning in to the Social Hotelier. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming your way, so stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.